elevators! Lines for the elevators! Stairs! This thing! So what do you say? Are you excited, buddy? I'm here at Anime Milwaukee with artist Ruth, and this is his awesome booth of tiny little animals that vomit rainbows.
Yeah.
Are they animals even, or are they just
a lot of them are monsters, and some of them are mashup of animals.
Excellent.
Yeah, mainly monsters though. I like monsters and weird demons and things.
But they're also cute because they like vomit rainbows and sparkles and like happiness.
They're not evil, even though they're monsters and demons. They're not really evil things either. They're just super cute and derpy and wonderful.
Awesome. Now, you draw things that are very different from what you see at most cons. How do you come up with these crazy ideas of what to draw?
A lot of them are based off of like real life, and I just flip them into this monster world. And some of them is just reading a lot of bizarre mythologies. And like recently, I've been reading a lot of Lovecraft, so that's where some of the demons are coming from. I'm also obsessed with Rubik's cubes, so some of my pieces have those in them. This is a crazy one though.
I've never seen something so infuriating, potentially world-ending, but also adorable.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, Jake, if people want to buy your stuff, like from the internet, where do you live on the internet? Where can people find you?
You can find me on CubeCrazy2.com, or I also have a print store on DeviantArt.com, and it's same thing, CubeCrazy2. That's my screen name on everything.
Awesome. And what other conventions are you going to hit up this year or in the future?
So far, I'm currently signed up for ASEN, so
gotcha.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome.
Other than that, I'm not sure. Still waiting to find out what I'm getting into.
Well, your booth is pretty hard to miss because it's very, very brightly colored.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Thanks again for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to talk to us. And I just wanted to say that you bought some stuff and we wanted to show it off. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Officially, I'm Samurai Dan. This is my lovely and talented wife, Jillian, who puts up with me. We're performers for anime conventions. In the real world, we run a 16th century samurai martial arts dojo. I teach sword and knife combat for a living, which this is the 21st century, as my mother is fond of pointing out to me, that me being the most dangerous swordsman in the Midwestern United States in 2014 is roughly akin to being the fastest rider for the Pony Express. It doesn't matter anymore.
And we are here enjoying ourselves at Anime Milwaukee 2014.
My first You're doing this just because it's being filmed.
Yeah.
Chris Ayers, again, talks me into doing my first Uncensored Panel in Texas. So we're 1,100 miles from home, and I'm thinking this is safe. But I was really uncomfortable because Uncensored Panels, if you've been to them before for the guests, not only have the attendees been drinking for 4 hours, so have the guests. So it starts rated R and goes directly down to we're all going to hell and I'm driving the bus.
Short bus.
And it's a terrible, so I'm sitting at the end and there's all these voice actors first, and the questions are predictably dirty and disgusting. And since I don't drink, and since my background is martial arts and I went to Bible college, fundamental independent Baptist Bible college, where you're going to hell because the ladies aren't all wearing dresses, and you're going to hell because you're a guy and you are. I mean, so I'm sitting here going, I don't have any stories like this. I can't tell you that this one time I dropped acid and got lost in the zoo and had sex with all the birds in the aviary. I don't have any stories like that.
You know, that's the soundbite they're going to take, right?
Samurai Dan, not safe for your birds. So I'm sitting here going, how do I get out of here? Because you've seen the big halls. The door is in the back. And if it's uncensored, they close the doors and there's security. So there are literally 600 people in this room between me and the door, and I'm behind the table and I can't get out. I'm going, there's no graceful way to leave. I can't get up and go, what do I do? And I'm just stressing, and they're getting closer and closer to my worst altered mind sex experience, whether it was drugs or alcohol or a mixture, and I'm going, I don't have any. I could make something up, but nothing's going to top these stories. J. Michael Tatum just told one that I'm going to have to look words up when I get back to my room, but I'm afraid to. And I'm going, what do I do? What do I do? And we'd perform for cosplay. I missed the guest dinner at this convention on Saturday night, and they went to Landry's Seafood. And I love shrimp, fish, crab legs. That's, I mean, if a con wants me to sign any contract, you don't even pay me, just guarantee we're going to Red Lobster, and I'm like, at that one, we're doing that con. And so we missed Landry's, and I'm sitting here going, how do I get out, how do I get out? I'm looking around, and the back door opens, and my wife pokes her head in, and she holds up a takeout bag from Landry's Seafood and goes, and I stood up from the table and tipped my chair over. I won't do it now because there's a banner behind me, but I stood up and went, ooh, I have to go, my wife has crabs. That was the only comment I made in that entire Uncensored panel. But it was bad enough that 4 years later, we go back to Onicon, and people, Jill, she hadn't even checked in yet. She pulls up, gets out of the car, and people are going, do you still have crabs? Are you doing better?
There are certain things that, everyone at the convention, no matter how many people are there, there's 6,000 attendees, they all know like that. Brat. Mm-hmm.
And that's not even the worst story.
Yeah, but we're not going to go further than that.
One of the biggest differences between Japanese swordsmanship and European swordsmanship is the care devoted to the weapons. And we work with Renaissance groups, and I spend a significant amount of time doing Western sword combat as well. But so one of the big pet peeves I have, it's Sunday, I speak English very goodly. When you train in Japanese swordsmanship, you never put the blade, you never touch it to the ground. So when you see like the pose where they stand with the sword in front of them like that, it's very common for European swordsmanship, especially like the Scottish, the claymore, the big two-handed sword. That's accepted. Japanese swordsmanship, that was a tremendous no-no because it would damage the blade. So it bothers me when we teach sword classes at conventions that the kids stand and they put the bokken on the, because at my school, that's 100 push-up penalty. I'm not exaggerating, I'm not lying. You don't do that because I'm never gonna put a real sword in somebody's hands if they're gonna damage the blade. And it's tough for me because I want to go, you on the floor now! And at an anime convention, that'll hurt somebody's feelings. Or some girl's going to think that's a really rude proposition. But either way, it's going to get me in trouble. So I have to hold back on that. Also, putting the sword on the shoulder was not, you just don't do that for Japanese swordsmanship. The minor one that I see in like movies and stuff is you'll see posters where people are holding the Japanese sword with their hands together. And that's how you hold a baseball bat. You choke up if you're a contact hitter, and if you swing for the fences, you hold the bottom so you can hit it farther. Japanese sword combat, you actually separate your hands by 2 or 3 fingers width. And anytime I see an actor, a movie poster, where they've got their hands together, I'm going, they can't get that. That's to me, that's like watching the cop shows and seeing somebody shoot 8 times with a 6-shot revolver. I'm going, really? Can nobody count in Hollywood? But anyway, that's my peeve.
My favorite or worst pet peeve is when they're doing baton twirling and pole twirling routines with a sword. So the one where you wrap it around your neck and kind of hula hoop it the other way, you don't do that with a sword! But we see it a lot.
Consider that natural selection. That 700-year-old blade that I cut with last night, the last offer we turned down for it was $40,000. It was one of 5 made by the same smith, and it has a Hormono engraving on it. So when you look at the left side of the blade, there is an old twin-edge blade with an Oriental dragon curled around it. It's one of the symbols of the emperor. And on the back is a character that identifies it as the water dragon. The smith made 5 blades, one representing each cardinal element of Oriental geomancy, the fire, water, earth, metal. And we know that because we met an elderly Japanese man who's a sword collector at a Tokenkai, Japanese sword show in Chicago 3 years ago, who had the fire dragon. We had a family reunion at this sword show because we had the blade. It was amazing. That blade's about $40,000. My wife's blade that she uses is 300 years old and was one of 13 made for the top Shinto shrines in Japan at that time. And it's worth about $30,000. And we don't always use that type of blade. We use reproduction blades for some of our stage shows, especially if we ever fly, we don't take those. And it's not a stab, if you'll pardon the sword joke, at airline luggage people and stuff, but we do have friends that are musicians, and they've called us before because we did a convention in Wichita, Kansas, and they flew back to LA and got back to LA just safe and sound, and their amps and guitars landed safely in Cleveland.
It took them like 7-8 days to get them back,
and we can't take those kind of chances with those blades. So when we fly, we take the $500 cutting sword things, and that's much more forgiving when sometimes we share the stage with other groups when we do a routine for opening ceremonies. And we did have a lady step on one of the blades when it was set to the side before we started, and everybody was supposed to go up one side, and a group came in late, so they went up the other side where we had our gear. And one of the things you talk about, the what do you hate that people do with swords, one of the others is you never step over a weapon, you go around. So if there's a pole arm on the floor, and it's just good sense. If you can go around the camera, you don't step over it, you go around it. She stepped above the sword and stepped down on it, and she broke the scabbard, the saya, the sheath. And if that would have been the 700-year-old blade, I'd be in prison. I wouldn't be here right now. But since it was just a reproduction blade, the replacement scabbard for that, the replacement saya was $68. And I was only this much perturbed. And she was mad at me for leaving it on the floor. Really? Anyway. Are lightsabers on this?
Lightsabers are, you can choose that, but just I'm slightly disappointed if you pick one.
Okay, well, we'll go another route then. 80s swords and sorcery movies. In the 80s, those were big for a while. Conan with Arnold, and they made a bunch of those different movies. And one was called The Sword and the Sorcerer. Lee Horsley was in it. Richard Mall, who played Bull from Night Court, was the bad guy. But the sword in that movie, and for anybody going, who's Lee Horsley? There was also Private Eye movie, TV shows were really big. Simon and Simon, Magnum P.I. There's another called... oh no, I'm going blank. Matt Houston. It only lasted a couple of years with some guy out of Dallas. He was the main character for that. But in The Sword and the Sorcerer, he had a broadsword that was 3 blades. So when you hold it towards your opponent, the handguard, the hilt, instead of running this way, also ran this way. So it was a cross, and it had 2 extra sword blades. It was a tri-sword. It was like a trident that was all blade. And you could press a stud on it, and it would fire off the 2 outside blades, so you could, like a crossbow. And when you swung that sword with 3 blades, these other guys were all sticking their swords out, and he'd go, whoa, and cut through all of them. I want that sword. Does that satisfy your sci-fi kind of geek moment thing? Because nobody's going to remember that blade. I own that DVD.
I will splice in footage from that movie for that.
That's awesome. I'm terrible with the names. Is it Glamdring from Lord of the Rings?
Glamdring was one.
But I like the one that
Beater and Biter. Just call them what the orcs did. Beater and Biter. That was Glamdring, and that's what the orcs called them.
True. But I liked a lot of the elvish sword blades from Lord of the Rings. Those would be my favorites.
Also, sci-fi books. R.A. Salvatore writes a huge amount of sci-fi books, and his main character is a drow, a dark elf, who uses 2 scimitars. And she's a huge Salvatore fan, and we've seen those blades put out as production. They're not very well balanced compared to what they should be. Maybe if they were magically enchanted like they are in the books, but I could see her killing herself with using those.